Hi everybody, welcome back to HighByte. I'm Tom. This is Zero to Pipeline, the course where we get you up and off the ground running with Intelligence Hub for your first time. Now, today's video, we've already got Intelligence Hub installed. We've already made our accounts. Should be all set. All we're going to do now is take a look through the UI for the first time and see if we can develop some orientation. One of the reasons I'm doing this video is because, as you can imagine, with the nature of a connect everything platform, there's a lot of moving pieces that are going to fit together. Now, rather than trying to talk about one of these at a time and point off in a bunch of different directions, all the rabbit holes we can go down in, I want to take this opportunity to give a quick once-over of the entire platform, try and get a lot of context built so that when we start looking closely at each of the individual modules, we'll have a better idea of kind of how they relate to everything else. So we're really looking to build some background today. This one should be pretty quick and superficial. But try and just get comfortable with the idea of what you're looking at. We'll go into the deeper details of each of these soon enough. All right, so now I'm going to launch Intelligence Hub for the first time. We've already got it installed. I've even got my install location open. So you can see I put it here under my program files. I made a new folder called Intelligence Hub, and I've got my folder right here. I'm going to open that guy up, open up the runtime. And because I'm using Windows and I'm not using a service for right now, I'm going to hit just the Start Windows batch file. We'll give this guy a moment. Oop, no moment needed. There it goes. So we should now have launched Intelligence Hub on our local installation. You can see right here the port that I'm running on by default is 45245. So now it's time. We're going to open up a browser. And we're going to take this guy and we're going to go to, we can just do localhost 45245. Bonk. And we should end up right here at the Intelligence Hub landing page. By default, we have a username administrator and no password. We're going to go ahead and log in there. You guys can change this later. I'm actually going to roll with it because it makes all of our demo and testing pretty straightforward and easy to work with. And you can see up at the top this nice little banner. If you've got a license, because you're already a customer, you can go here and we'll activate our license. I do not have a license because I'm just installing this to demo it. So we're going to stay uninstalled. So I'm just going to head back there to my landing page now. Up at the top, if I hit the logo, I can get some information about the version I'm running. Here I have 4.1.1. If you've got a newer version, don't worry about it. If anything is changed drastically, I'll try and replace this video. Otherwise, some things might be a little different, but hopefully this logic is still going to hold on. And here I'm going to go down this menu on the left-hand side and just show you a little bit about each one of these pieces that we're looking at. So let's start up at the top with connections. Certainly, if we're going to use Intelligence Hub to connect to a lot of information or connect to a lot of data systems, we need to make some connections. This is the module in where we're going to handle that. We're going to set up all our connections here. Give you an example. Set up an MQTT. Here we go. So here's my MQTT. I'm just going to make a new connection. I'm going to name it. I'm going to go ahead to next. And this is where I can tell Intelligence Hub what protocol I want to use. So I'm going to scroll through this real quick for you guys. You can see there is a lot of protocols that we can use, a lot of systems we can connect to. And then especially this here JDBC driver that lets us connect to a lot of arbitrary databases. So plenty of options here to connect to. And if you've got any questions, definitely let us know about the thing you want to connect to, and we'll see what we can do. Maybe it's already possible. So we're making an MQTT connection. Go ahead and hit that. I'm going to change this to port 1885, and we'll talk about why in a minute. But otherwise, I'm just going to fill in. This is going to run locally. We'll also talk about why in a moment. I'm not going to worry about the rest of this. Create. And so I've made my connection to MQTT. But you'll find in Intelligence Hub that inputs and outputs are handled separately. So inputs get data into Intelligence Hub. Outputs send data out from Intelligence Hub. Let's connect an input. MQTT in. And we'll just do my topic. Great. Here we can also, let's go back to our connection and then let's look at our outputs. Let's make an output to the same topic. MQTT out. My topic. Did I configure the same name there? In my topic, back, outputs, out my topic. Sure did. Great. Don't forget to hit save. We'll mess that up at some point. Always want to hit save. So that's how we're going to configure our connections. We can do that with any of the data systems we want to connect to. Next, let's go to conditions. It's the next thing on our list here. And conditions are a way that we can sort of filter data based on what we read from our inputs. So we may not use these as much as a lot of other things, but let's go ahead and look at it. My condition. I can make a new condition here, and this condition can be of a few different types. So I can aggregate data. I can create alarms that only output something based on some criteria from the data. I can make a custom one that's going to output a custom message based on the data, and a deadband that's only going to output data if it changes by a certain amount. Let's not go too deep into this right now. Just know that conditions are a way we can take incoming data, filter or modify it, and then use it as subsequent incoming data. Models might seem at first to be kind of similar. So here, this is a good way we can standardize the data that we're working with. Or we can say at least, all right, if you're going to make me data that looks like this, it better look like this. So a good example that you might want to do this is for a pump. You got pumps in your manufacturing facility. You got them all over the place. They're all saved a little bit differently. We'll go into details on that later. Again, don't worry about it. But let's say I want to define what a pump is to me. Well, I know a pump has a flow rate, probably. A pump has a power draw, probably. And a pump has maybe vibration and a name. We'll give it a name. So these are all the things that I need a pump to define for me. So, you can imagine all of these may be saved under slightly different names, slightly different conventions, different units, things like that. We want them all to look like this at the end of the day. So this model is going to define the finished shape of our data. Similarly, once we've made a model and we know what our data should look like, we have instances. Instances are going to tell us, all right, this is one of those pumps. So it's like our blueprint and our actual item. So there we go. My pump. Perfect. And down here, we're going to have to select what model we're using. Of course, we're modeling a pump. We're going to use the pump model. Great. Now you can see here are those attributes we just wrote in there, and here's how we're going to connect to them. We could connect them with an input that we configured earlier. There's our MQTT topic. Look at that. We're already saying drop that guy in as the name of this pump. Definitely opportunities to do more with that, but you can see how once I connect or configure all my inputs, I could pretty easily fill out one of these attributes. Namespaces is going to be a more complicated topic. This lets us set up data structures or a single namespace where we organize our data hierarchically. This might be similar to how you may have data stored in MQTT, Pi, Ignition, something of that sort, where certain pieces of information have sub-information, etc. So the real strength of our namespace, though, is that despite having everything organized in one sensible structure to begin with, it also lets us query, where you may have all of your pumps organized by location, but your maintenance team may be interested in, well, I just want the lubrication pumps, or I just want the pumps made by Bayer, for instance. So the strength here in our namespace, when we make different elements that can fit in here, and we can connect different references to them, we can build this whole structure, but then we can query within it. Namespaces are pretty cool. We'll go more into the details of it later. Pipelines. Pipelines, I think, are going to be the center of Intelligence Hub now. So we're going to talk a lot about pipelines. I'm going to default to thinking about pipelines as the heart of everything that we're working on. Pipelines are where we move data from our inputs or our other data sources to our outputs or other data destinations. So I'm going to make a new pipeline real quick. My pipe. And you're going to see we get this nice visual builder page. So here I'm going to go up to the top and see the stages. These are all the ways that all the stages I can put in my pipeline, all the things I can do to affect the data as we go. I'm going to grab a trigger. Here's a pulled trigger. This kicks off our pipeline. Makes it start every 1 second once I enable it. And maybe from there, I'm going to read some data in. Maybe if it worked, I'll do some transformation on it. And then I'll put it into a model. And I'll write it out. That seems like a reasonable way to handle some data. Maybe if it didn't work, I just want to write somewhere else some notification, right? So you can see we've made our first ugly pipeline with none of our references filled in. So this guy's not going to work right now. But we can start with our pipelines and use it to move data in stages and affect it as we go. This is a lot of power, a lot of strength here. So we're going to leverage pipelines a lot. You're going to see a few ways that data can be passed from one piece to another outside of pipelines. Pipelines have actually been added in a later revision of Intelligence Hub, so we didn't always have pipelines. So you will find some ways we can do certain things without pipelines, but I do think it's probably a good place to start when you're setting up your data flows. All right, I'm not going to be able to save this because of all the errors that I configured, but that's okay. We don't need this. We can come back to it later. So that's my pipeline stage. Poor guy's in error. The next thing I'm going to go to is the functions. This is a pretty minor piece, but I like it anyways. A lot of what we do here in Intelligence Hub is based in JavaScript. So when you're manipulating data manually, it'll be in through JavaScript. But this is a low-code solution. We don't need to know JavaScript for everything. However, if we were writing something and we ended up using a particular function a lot, the functions area is a nice place where we can save functions that we use a bunch. Now, I use this one a bunch because I think it's interesting to look at. This is a word up of length x that returns random nonsense. So it's just going to return x characters out of this string. But I don't want to write this function out every time I use it. So I'm going to drop it in here. And now when I'm writing functions later on, I can just write word of this length, and it'll give me some gibberish that I can use as a placeholder data. I like using random numbers as placeholder data. So pretty minor piece, but if you enjoy coding and enjoy writing some functions that your team is going to use, this is a great place to make that a little more repeatable. All right, so that's our configuration portion of this menu. That's going to cover a lot of how we're going to move data through Intelligence Hub, but let's keep going. Let's look at managing Intelligence Hub itself. So down in the Manage menu, I'm going to start with the project. This is where we're going to import and export projects from Intelligence Hub. So your project is everything that you're looking at. So if I can import and export here, I can import or export a full project. So if I import a full project, turn this little slider on, I'm going to overwrite anything that I've got saved here. I'm going to totally replace it with whatever I import. I can import either a JSON, I'll just drop it in there, it's a JavaScript object, or I can upload a file. I click this, I get a little browse. Likewise, if I'm exporting, I can either select just the things that I want, so I can export certain pieces of my project, or I can export my full project. When I press export, it's going to show me the entire JSON of the project that I'm working on. And down at the bottom, I can download it. So you'll probably use this to share configurations with your colleagues, or if you're working with someone and you need to share an issue that you're encountering, this is a really good way to do it. If we keep going through our Manage menu here, we'll get the users. Like I said, we start with our administrator user with no password. I'm just going to leave this guy for now, but of course, if you're setting this up for production or for use at your side, you're going to want to create more users with real passwords. Likewise, once you have users, you might want to have roles. So certain users have certain permissions. Kind of holds as you might expect for just about any other system. So you can define your roles here. You have admin, which can do everything, and default, which can't by default. But you were able to create your own. Employing that, you can also use tags in those roles. Now, tags can be used just for sorting and organizing on your own side, for your own sake, through Intelligence Hub. We can search for tags, organize assets by tags, things like that. But you can also tag things for certain permission levels so that not everybody has access to everything, gives you a little more control. So tags can be great either for organization or for permissions. And then finally, excuse me, our settings menu. There's a lot going on in here, so let's take it a little bit at a time. Up at the top, we have the configuration. We can set our Intelligence Hub, the actual like server of the Intelligence Hub, to use HTTPS. Probably want to do that, although it's off by default. You can say what port you want to leave it on. One of the nice things about this is you can have a couple different versions of Intelligence Hub running on the same system. You can have them accessed by different ports. So if you want to have dev, prod, maybe a more experimental off-the-walls version of your development environment, you can host another version and try it on another port. You can use this as sort of a dev test in between, something like that. We also have here the option to enable central config. We'll talk more about this later, but this is where you can set up one central hub of Intelligence Hub, and then have other installs, other runtimes of Intelligence Hub as spokes, and you can send information out and pull it back in from them. And then we also have the autosave interval, which will save backups of our configuration. So if you totally brick it, you have a chance to come back. This is done automatically, even if you're not exporting projects, but probably beneficial to save your own exports anyways. Let's keep going down. We've got logging here. So we have an audit log and a debug log and an event log. You can configure all of your logging options right here. Expressions is mostly for how we're going to handle sort of free-form JavaScript. So I'm not going to dive really into this, but if you want to know any more about any of these things, you can check out these little tooltips that are going to pop up as we hover over the question marks. There are other resources that we're going to talk about in a moment too. Redundancy. We have the ability for one Intelligence Hub to act as a backup for another. So that option is right here. And then here are two settings that I am going to talk about a lot, or I'm going to use a lot. The MQTT broker. Intelligence Hub comes bundled with an MTT broker. It's already there and you may use it. We're going to use it a lot in this course as we just sort of create data and have it as a nice convenient way is to put data into something and source data from something. So it's convenient. We're going to use it a lot, but it is here and it's configured here. By default, it's disabled. So I've enabled it. And you'll see by default, it's at port 1885. Now, normally this is 1883 for a lot of MQTT brokers. 1885 we've set as our default just so it doesn't conflict if you install this next to another system. Likewise, we have a REST data server. We can use this to kick off pipelines since 4.1 and get information back from them. We can use it to make small configurations. We can use it to read inputs and write to outputs. So there's sort of nice API integration that we can use, and we can access it right here. So if you want spec or details on that API, go ahead and enable your REST data server and hit this link, which is going to take us to our Swagger docs where you can start to get into some of the API stuff here. We'll talk more about API information later on. Finally, down at the bottom, we've got the security. This is how often you're going to have to log back into Intelligence Hub. All right, let's try another tab. Variables let us set system variables that we can reference later on. Luckily, these go pretty quick. Our secrets are where we can store passwords that we're going to use to access different systems. And we can do this and have them stored securely so that we're not storing passwords in plain text. This is that license page we saw earlier on, where once you've purchased a license for Intelligence Hub, you can upload it here. This license is site-based, so even if you're just installing this Intelligence Hub on your own machine, if you're working at a site where you've already purchased a license, you can go ahead and use that same one. You're not going to overburden a site license with your own test install, so feel free to install it, goof around so long as your IT team is okay with it, and you're not going to violate anything, don't worry. And then finally, we have our certificates page. So this is where if you're interfacing with a platform that is validated by certificate, you would generate those certificates and add them here. That's kind of a whole process, so I'm not going to demo that in this particular moment. Let's go quickly into these tools here. We've got the log. You can see this is our event log, so we can see sort of everything that's been going on in our Intelligence Hub. You'd also have the opportunity to get your audit log if you just want to see what's being changed at any given time. Maybe you're particularly concerned about who has access and what is happening from point to point in a production environment. So that, go back to my settings here for a moment. That enable audit log events is going to be very important to you. And then finally, one more thing that I like is this UNS client. Now, I'm actually going to open this. If I click this, it's going to bring me there as you would expect. I'm going to go back to the settings here. I'm going to middle click this. I'm going to open it in another tab. one of the cool things about Intelligence Hub is it manages multiple tabs pretty well. You do have to log in each tab, but once you're there, you should be all set. This UNS client is an MQTT client, so it lets us view any given MQTT broker, but we've got one built in. I configured that my MQTT connection early on, and here it is already auto-populated. So I can use this and I can connect to that connection, and we can see not much of anything is going on because nothing else is connected and we're not generating any data. Real quick, let me open up that connections page. I'm going to log in again because I opened it in another tab, but I'm going to go into my MQTT and I'm going to go to an output. So here's my output that I configured earlier. I've got these nice test write functions. So here I can write directly out to this output without messing around with a pipeline or anything like that. So just give a quick little, there we go. You're going to see me make a lot of typos in this course. Great. I've wrapped this into parentheses. We'll maybe explain why later on, but if you're creating an object in your test write field, wrap it into parentheses. It has to do with our expression evaluation in the virtual machine, our script engine, excuse me. And so I'm going to go ahead and write this output, and you can see success. It took a minute because we're kind of waking up here, but we have written to my topic. And you can see there is our object with a nice little timestamp added for our convenience. Just the way I can test write, if I go back to my connection, so my overview, there's my whole connection, my inputs, there's the input I configured earlier for that same topic. I can do a test input. Ooh. Oh no, what happened? My topic, my topic. All right, I didn't actually end up changing anything there, but we have only just recently booted this up, so maybe it's not too surprising to me. I'm gonna go ahead and change my, let's do this again. So you can see here I've got hello weird, so we're getting a little weird behavior. I'm gonna write this output, check it out in my browser. There we go, hello world. And then I'm going to come back here to my input, which I've opened up in another tab, and test that input, and you can see we've got hello world. So a little bit of wake up behavior, but once we're up and running, shouldn't be an issue. We can test our inputs here in our connection inputs, as well as viewing them here in our UNS client. All right, now we're getting right about to the end, but I do want to take one more moment. I said there's some other resources we can offer you guys. So first of all, if you're ever working with something in Intelligence Hub and you know what you want to do, but you're not sure how to drive, you just want to know what kind of syntax is this field expecting? What's the shape of this data supposed to look like? What is the technical what that I should be putting in here? I want you to come up here and hit this little question mark, and that is going to bring up our user guide. Now, our user guide is like our technical manual. So this will tell us everything about how we have to put information into Intelligence Hub. So if we were wondering something about MQTT, we could search for it up here. We can click through that. We can see we're in the configuration, we're in the connections, we're in the MQTT. And here it's going to tell us, all right, here's what the client ID is, the username, the password. If we scroll down, it'll tell us how to configure input settings, what each of those settings means, how to type a payload, how we should need to set up our output settings in order for our final data to arrive in the right shape. So the user guide is a great way to answer your syntax questions, your how to configure settings questions. Up here, there's also another link. There's the knowledge base. The knowledge base is another layer up, a little more abstract. So this is where, first of all, these getting started tutorial series are. If you want to work more through some topics, you can check it out in Getting Started. A lot of this material is going to be pretty similar to that. We got this nice little bot that's going to connect to a conversation for us, find us resources if we need it. So feel free to hit that. Here we also have a lot of how-tos and tutorials of doing more specific applications. So if you wanted to know how to connect to Pi, but you had a large number of assets. So this isn't really how do I configure the connection. It's like, what do I do if my connection is just too much data for one pass? You might be interested in this. So let's go ahead and check that guy out. This is where we can take a look and see what are some of my design options or suggestions, anything like that. So this is our opportunity in the knowledge base to share more generalized knowledge, some experiential knowledge. This is more of our guidelines and suggestions, whereas the user guide is our technical how-to. So that about wraps it up. I hope you guys enjoyed this and enjoyed getting your feet wet in Intelligence Hub and getting started moving around the UI. I'm excited to get into the next video where we're actually going to start building a pipeline and making some example data that we can use in order to test out some of the features as we go through and learn more of these situations. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and stay tuned.